Good evening, members of council, staff. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting for the Town of Pelham Policy and Priorities Committee to order. It has been moved by Councillor King that the agenda for the February 21st, 2017 regular meeting of Policy and Priorities Committee be adopted. Is there any changes to the agenda?
No.
There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. That is any conflicts of interest that members of council may have. Any members have any conflicts?
None, Mr. Mayor.
Can that be so noted that there are no conflicts from members of council? We move to new business. It's been moved by Councillor Durley that Policy and Priorities Committee received the Department of Community Planning and Development report for information as it pertains to the allocation of heritage designation plaques, and that P&P Committee direct planning staff to allocate the heritage designation plaques as recommended, and that the P&P Committee direct planning staff to determine with the assistance of the town clerk an appropriate council meeting during which the heritage designation plaques can be distributed to property owners. Questions or comments? Councillor Junkin?
I would just like to suggest that perhaps we have designated the flagpole in Fenwick back in 2013, and we've had the plaques, I think, whatever, it'll be 6 months or a year. And the rest of them, I don't have any problem with however we would distribute them, but I'm just wondering if, realizing since I've been on this council how slow municipal or provincial or federal government moves, that it might be a while before we get around to getting extra plaques, that perhaps we should take one of these plaques and have a little ceremony and designate it to the flagpole.
Okay, thank you. Is there a recommendation on which one?
Or they're all the same.
No, which one you wouldn't do?
Oh, I see. No, I haven't given that a thought. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kersey?
Perhaps, Mr. Mayor, it's more appropriate to ask the question, how much do these plaques cost? And if we're only talking the need of 2 additional plaques, let's get the other 2 plaques and designate all 6 of them at the same time. Have a ceremony here, have people come in, have the owners come in, we hand them the plaques, we do the whole thing all at once rather than, well, we're going to use that plaque for this. And so that would be what I would suggest.
Mr. Mayor, through you, these plaques are solid brass plaques. They're quite lovely. We do have 4 of them that were donated to the town. I believe they cost somewhere around $400 or $500 each. And so what we had suggested was that the 4 plaques be presented to the property owners of the 4 homes that are designated, and that next year we budget for 2 new plaques, and next year we could plaque the additional 2 properties, and then as other properties get designated, we would continue to budget for 1 or 2 a year.
Thank you. Councillor Kersey?
I just wonder whether we have any money in the reserves that we could use for this and at least move forward with this.
Madam Treasurer?
I mean, it's $1,000 at the worst case scenario, Madam Treasurer.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, which reserve are you talking about?
You pick them, I don't care.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so moved.
All right, so Councillor Kersey, you're going to move that amendment?
will.
Second
I
by,
will.
I'm sure, Councillor Junkin. I'll let him, or I guess we don't need a seconder, sorry. That, okay, so what are we going to move here? Planning staff allocate the heritage designation as recommended with the addition of purchasing 2 other plaques. How's that sound? Okay?
Get it done.
All, Councillor Durley to the
Thank you,
amendment.
Mr. Mayor. This may present a bit of a problem in procurement because these were donated by one firm, and we would have to open it up to 2 or 3 firms or whatever according to our procurement policy. So, it may take some time, but I don't think time is of the matter here. But in order to duplicate that one completely, I don't know whether the person that made that would have copyright on it or whatever on that. So it may be complicated, but certainly you can weed all this out when you go out for tender.
Okay, Madam Treasurer?
Through you, yes, one of the concerns at the onset of having the donation was that we were sole sourcing, if that was the situation. But we have determined what the specifications are of this. We would send it out for 3 quotations to make sure we are complying, and then we'll come back to council.
Okay, thank you. I had Councillor Ribbiak.
Go ahead, yep.
Councillor Durley figured my question, so
Okay.
I'm good, thank you.
Councillor Kersey, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, another thought that might be worth pursuing is, since they donated the 4, they might be willing to donate the additional 2, and perhaps we could give them some advertisement on the bus as part of our bus program, or we might want to give them some Summerfest sponsorship. I'm sure the Summerfest committee would support giving them some credit on that, if they would be willing to do something like that.
Okay, thank
So-
you for thinking outside of the box. Can we, let's, so the motion is purchase 2 additional plaques, purchase, or I would say procure.
Thank you, that sounds very good. I'll be sure to bring this up at the Summerfest meeting tomorrow, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Junkin.
I was wondering if perhaps, let's put it this way, I was under the impression that there is a certain threshold that you had to be over in order to have to go to tender. Is that not right? I thought that as long as you stayed under a certain amount,
Yeah.
you didn't have to go tender. Maybe I'm misled on that.
It wouldn't be a tender, it was a quote.
It's an informal,
Madam Treasurer,
sorry,
quickly.
through you, there's 3 different stages of quotations. Anything over $300 needs an informal quotation process, so we would still have to go out for quotations.
Okay, yep.
Thank you. To the amendment, all those in favor? Any opposed? Amendment carries. And now to the main motion as amended. Councillor Durley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think further to this, I don't want to amend a motion again, but the situation that I have mentioned in the past, if we're looking for procurement of more plaques, I think we should direct staff to see if somehow for next year's budget to look at ways that we can put something similar to a CIP for designated properties in assisting people to bring them up to standards, because in fact, if your place gets designated, whether you want it or not, any renovations may cost a lot more money than if you or I were doing it as a modern building. So just looking at the possibilities of that, not saying to actually do it, but again, we were looking at the cost of doing something with the Timsdale property was over $2 million. And this is unreasonable to ask a person to put out this kind of money just because somebody thinks it's a heritage property and you don't. So I'm just putting that out for thoughts, and I just wonder if there's any merit in this.
I think we did already discuss this, Ms. Weens. I'm turning to you. Did we not discuss the idea of a heritage CIP, or was it during some of the budget deliberations? I could be wrong.
Mr. Mayor, through you, I'm not sure about a heritage CIP. Usually, if you have a district, a heritage district, which is under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act, then you could create some kind of CIP, because it's actually has to be a study area that has boundaries as opposed to individual properties. But there are other programs that are available to provide incentive, and one of them is a tax rebate to properties that are designated under the Ontario Heritage Act, and that provides them with a rebate on either the provincial education tax component, the regional tax, or the local tax. So, and council, if they want to go through that, could look at that, and there's anywhere up to 30% rebate that's available.
So
that's a program that we would have to certainly pass a bylaw and do consultation.
Right, so
on.
just to that, Councillor Durley, we don't have the answer now, but can we direct staff to investigate that and come back to us at a report?
That's exactly where I was coming from.
Okay, perfect.
Exactly.
Okay, so I've asked the clerk to include that as staff direction to investigate the possibility of that type of tax rebate or incentives for heritage properties. Anyone else to that? Okay, so we'll look forward to that coming to us in due course. And now to the motion as amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. I was going to say, I don't know if it's possible, sorry. it might be nice now that this is Canada's 150th birthday, that perhaps we do this somehow in relation to that, the heritage designation. So as we think back 150 years and look forward, so in terms of the timing of, with the town clerk, with a meeting of the heritage designation plaques, I don't know if it's possible to get the plaques done and built and whatever, but it'd be nice if somehow around Canada Day, we might be able to do the plaque presentation to the property owners. I'll leave that for staff to work on. It has been moved by Councillor Ribbiak and seconded by Councillor King, although not needed, that Committee of the Whole recommend that council that staff bring forward a reserve fund policy at the next priorities and policies meeting. Questions, comments? Councillor Kersey?
Very briefly, Mr. Mayor, this is absolutely in keeping with good fiscal responsible government. And having a reserve policy will help us not find our reserves, not in a reserve position, but in a deficit position. And then establishing guidelines will also help to drive the budget discussions as well. So I'm 100% in favor of this. I'm very, very pleased to see this come forward.
Okay, thank you. Certainly appreciate the treasurer putting this together. Any other comments? Excuse me. I think I have some limited experience with this in terms of the region and a reserve fund policy. Unfortunately, the region took the approach that this does not suggest, which is they took a one-size-fits-all approach, which is, this is saying don't do that. But it might be interesting to note what other municipalities do and suggest minimum balances, et cetera. So that's helpful, and I think it depends on the type of reserve. So I think of the snow clearing reserve, which probably still has that $50,000 that we invested in it a few years ago and don't need this year, you know, those kind of things, so. Or not.
It does not.
It does not, okay. So I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. It's been moved by Councillor King that Policy and Priorities Committee receive the Public Works Report Annual Drinking Water Reports for 2016 for information, and that P&P Committee recommend that Council approve the attached summary report and the MOECC Annual Report, Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Annual Report. Questions, comments? Ryan's poised to answer any questions, any comments we may have on this report. And I'm going to start with Councillor Junkin.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor.
Here it comes.
No, it's very easy. Let's see,
Mr.
On
Cook,
the,
are you ready? I hope so.
Up on your feet. Come on. He's getting choked up already.
on the 5.1, under the legislative compliance, under the 5.1 water haulers, I see that we have the all water haulers wishing to access the water loading station must provide a current Niagara Region Public Health Department inspection. Now, is that a town requisition or rule, or is that a region?
Cook?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. That is a town requirement. The region is looking for more municipalities to jump on board with that. The Niagara Region Public Health Department would really like to look at every truck that's hauling water, but we are one of the only ones that are actively requiring that for our station.
Okay, thank you.
He adopted that a couple of years ago.
Yes. Thank you. Councillor Kersey.
Well, thank
We'll
you,
just go right down the line here, Mr. Cook.
You should have stayed on your feet because I actually have several pages of questions. But not to make you nervous, is your glass of water full?
Okay, Councillor, don't badger the witness. I mean,
Don't
the staff
badger the
person.
witness. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I looked at the report, one of the areas that there was some concern around was the competency of staffing. In that we have 3 water operators who are at level 2 and 2 that are, I believe 2 that are at level 1. and that it was assumed that over the next several years, they would be brought up to a level 2 competency, which is where they need to be. So I guess my question is, how much would it cost to accelerate that process and bring them up to competency in the short term as opposed to stretching it over the long term?
Mr. Cook, are you able to assist the councillor? If not, we'll turn to the treasurer.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's not a question of cost. It's really the time in the system. So a class 1 operator needs to spend a certain amount of time in the system, in a class 2 system, to be able to apply and receive that upgrade.
I see.
So it's just a matter of the experience working in the town of Pelham.
Kind of like an apprenticeship
Like an
program sort of
apprenticeship,
idea?
so it's an hour thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see, I
Okay.
see.
Go ahead. You got him standing now.
Yes, further, within the capital project review that you had, there was commentary regarding the water mains that are still remaining. But there was no distribution of breaks. So in terms of trying to prioritize future expenditures on water mains, so for example, Station is pretty much cast iron, right?
Yes.
And so is that an area where we're seeing the majority of water breaks? Like are there water mains around that have been identified as holier than others or more prone to breakage than others?
We do list the locations of the water main breaks in the report.
Yeah.
But when we're developing the capital budgets, you're really trying to it's not based solely on breaks. You're really trying to do a risk assessment on that particular piece of water main. So Station Street, for instance, had a number of breaks in the past, and it's kind of it is an area where we do repair quite a bit. It's up in the capital plan because when we shut down that section of main, we end up shutting down the co-op housing for seniors. So we look at what institutions really are affected, and we try to put a risk rating on each particular main section. So a smaller street, mostly residential, it has a few breaks, yes, but when we shut it down, we're only affecting a certain number of customers, might be pushed back in the capital planning as compared to a more higher risk main.
I see, okay.
I think page 15 has the chart of those breaks.
Yeah, that's very helpful, that's great. The other question I had was with respect to the backflow program that was identified in the assessment. And maybe it's an unfair question to ask you. I was prepared to ask the director. I wondered, there was some discussion around keeping at least the first phase in-house and taking a look and trying to identify risks that exist within the community so that we might be able to have some idea of what the scale of the problem is, and then also to look at other municipalities and the programs that they have
Yeah.
without having to go out to hire a consultant. So
I think we circled that.
we did, and that's
particular
why
issue,
I was
so-
just asking that as a follow-up, Mr. Mayor, to find out if there's been any pursuit of that,
Okay.
and if there's been any.
Mr. Cook, can you assist, or are you?
Can portions of it. The in-house backflow prevention testing, we're developing right now a procedure that either staff will complete the backflow prevention testing, or we might contract a local plumber to do it, and then that reporting and kind of the administrative background of that we'll take in-house. For the other half of the question about the rest of the town, I'm not really prepared to answer that.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mr.
Other questions, comments to the report? I was very, very pleased actually to read this report. It's very comprehensive, and I don't recall a report in previous years to be this comprehensive. And so kudos to all the staff that worked on this and put this together. Things like water loss and showing the percentage of water loss and how that's gone down over the years from a high of 18.5 a few years ago and sort of hovering around that 18%, and now in 2016. And it outlines a number of the changes that have occurred down to 8.5, which is amazing. You know, so, and to see that as well, we've talked about, I know I've talked formally with Mr. Mantle, et cetera, about the number of cast iron water mains that we have and how we keep improving our infrastructure. And this report clearly identifies, it only goes back to 2010, and I know there was considerable work prior to that. But to replace those pipes and showing that we are actively working to replace those cast iron water mains and are actively working to improve our system. So I just think it's a very comprehensive report, and kudos to staff. And maybe I'd encourage, after council approves it, that perhaps we can put it on the website and let people read it, because it's very, very informative. And I think, you know, each councillor has picked out a little piece that they find most interesting, and no doubt residents will do the same. I wondered if there could be a small adjustment, again, just for clarity of information, it is on the water leaks. By using a percentage, one kind of, where is it here? I had it. A percentage of 8.5, and yet the water usage for 2016 actually went up. So conceivably the 8.5 might be a little bit higher. So I just wondered if that chart could be, if staff could look at that chart to amend it to actually include the per cubic meter input of how much that constitutes, because it really is a fluctuation of, so is it the same amount all the time, or going down, or is it just going down because we use more water? That might help understand what those water leaks are. So I would just ask if it's easy to do, that be included. I don't know, I had it here. The water leak chart, what page is that, Mr. Cook?
Page 13.
Page 13. Thank you very much. It just has the percentage amounts, and maybe if you have it, and maybe it's just a calculation out, but the cubic meter, just to see how that changes.
We certainly
Cook,
can.
yeah.
We can change to a volumetric reading. We could do your unaccounted for, unbilled water. Like, there's a number of different ways we could show that same figure.
I was just thinking to put the volumetric, although it's 8.5, it's 8. The report also indicates that 2016 was a higher usage of water than, I believe, the previous 2 years. So is it the same amount volumetrically, or and it's just going down on the percentage ways? So it'd just be helpful to have those volumetric numbers. Treasurer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The calculation is based on a reconciliation that's done on a monthly basis compared to what the region says that we used in water and what we actually build out in water. So that difference is what constitutes a loss. So we
Okay.
take into consideration all of the water mains that are ran for the sake of cleaning the water lines
Right.
out, pushing them out,
Right.
things that are used by the fire department with water. So the actual volume shouldn't matter in respect to providing that percentage, because the volume must equal the amount that goes to the region, or there should be some sort of explanation as to why it doesn't. And that, the stuff that's left unexplained is that loss factor. But we certainly can, I know that these numbers came from Kristen in the water
Yeah,
billing department,
okay.
but we certainly can look at the volumetric issues there as well and report them both ways.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, it's just, I'm intrigued to look at the numbers if you don't mind, so if it's not too hard. Councillor Papp, did you have something?
Very quickly, it's not something that normally I would bring up, but I guess through you to Mr. Cook. Unexpected staffing issues have impacted the hydrant maintenance program, and all hydrants may not receive their annual maintenance. I recall over my career that under fire compliance and insurance, that every single hydrant has to be inspected and cleared for the year. Can you just give me an update of what's happened? Are we up to snuff?
Mr. Cook?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, we did have an employee go off with some health problems.
Right.
Impacted significantly the operations in the water department. I believe we are up to about 82% of the hydrants were maintained and inspected properly, but there was a number of them that we just weren't able to get to.
I'm not being critical. I do know in past instances that under insurance requirements, that there's been incidents that hydrants, for all intents and purposes, need to be fully compliant.
Are we back on track, Mr. Cook?
Yeah, this year we're.
That's all I needed to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Any others?
No.
Great. There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks for your work on this, Mr. Cook. Please pass along our thanks to other staff as well. It's that time. It's been moved by Councillor Kersey that this regular meeting of committee be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for March 6th, following council. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Extra hour of,
I've only been here for